Who pays realtor fees in Paris? Now, this is a question that I get asked the whole time by prospective buyers who have been perusing listing adverts, seen fees paid by the buyer on some, fees paid by the seller on others, don't understand what's going on, and rightly so. So I'm going to try and explain a bit of that in this video today. Give you an example as well. Of course, it's a massively topical issue in the US, multi-billion dollar lawsuits ongoing at the moment about agency fees, buyers, sellers, the splits, who pays what. So yeah, let's get into it. First and foremost, 99% of transactions in France are only involving one agent. So big difference already with, say, the US, where it's about 80% have two agents. So this agent is contracted by the seller. They will sign a mandate to sell their property, and then they will list the property and hopefully find a buyer, find an agreement between the two of them, and on we go. This is a system which has worked for many, many years. Obviously not without its conflict of interest, whereby one agent is representing two different parties with two different interests, and also incentivized really ultimately just to get a deal done rather than get the best possible result for their clients. So yeah, conflict of interest in there, but again, it's a system that has worked for many, many years. One agent, seller's agent, okay? More and more though, people are using buyer's agents, particularly in Paris. A buyer's agent will typically be remunerated between 2 and 3% of the overall price of the property, including the seller's agent's fees. And then, however, that they are about only 1% of transactions at the moment. But yeah, more and more local buyers who want help navigating a market without an MLS, international buyers who want that as well as the guidance, and particularly in Paris, we're really seeing an increase in these buyers agencies such as ourselves. This isn't an ad about a video, about why to use a buyer's agents. I'm going into that another time. And so with that, I do want to be super clear that you do not have to use one. You can just call up any listing ad and you can get a viewing of the property directly with the listing agent. They will show it to you. And you can move on from there. So you do not have to use a buyer's agent. If you do choose to use one, you will be paying an extra 2 to 3% on top of the price for the property, including the seller's agent's fees. What I do want to do, and this is really important to get to, is break down the difference between fees paid by the buyer and fees paid by the seller, because you see them on adverts the whole time, on listing adverts, and it can be confusing. So I think the first thing to say is that, and let's take the example of a €1 million property, it does not change the amount of, it does not change the price of the property that you will pay, including the seller's agent fees. So if you see a property listed at 1 million, whether it's fees paid by the buyer or the seller, then you will pay a maximum of €1 million for that property, okay? It will not change the price. Again, it will change the breakdown between what the seller receives and what the agent receives, and it will also affect the stamp duty that the buyer pays on the property. So all the stamp duty is always paid 100% by the buyer. So it does affect that, and I'm actually going to break this down the two different scenarios now. So example of a property, €1 million list price, including 5% commission. If this is 5% commission fees paid by the seller would receive €1 million and they would pay 5% of that, so €50,000 to their agent. Now that €1 million received by the seller is actually the base value of the property. What's received by the seller is the base value. And so your stamp duty, your notaires fees of around 7% would come out as 7% of 1 million, so €70,000. Also, important point here is that in fees paid by the seller, the agency does not have to show the breakdown, so it'd be 950 and 50 of the fees in their advert, okay? We'll come back to that point in a minute. If the fees are paid by the buyer, however, the 1 million euros is broken down into the net seller or base value of the property plus 5% buyer plus 5% commission, okay? And so the maths works out a little bit differently here. It works out as about, let me just get to that, 952,000 for the seller or the base value and 48,000 for their agency. So what's this? This is first and foremost a little bit more for the seller. And most importantly, it is a lower base value for the calculation of stamp duty, notaires fees. So in the previous example paid by the seller, it's about 70,000 euros. For paid by the buyer, you would pay your 7% on the 952, which comes out as about 67,000. So it's a little difference there, 3,000 euros, which is obviously, obviously a significant amount of money, right? We always, when we sell properties, we always do fees paid by the buyer because first of all, it's more transparent. Fees paid by the buyer, you put on the listing advert that the breakdown is, 952 and 48,000 of commissions. So that's completely clear from the get-go. Also, it means that the seller gets a little bit more in their pocket and the buyer pays a little bit less tax. So that's always nice. So we prefer doing it like that. It's not always the case though. A lot of agencies will not want to show how much they're making on a property, so they will prefer to have a fees paid by the seller arrangement. And of course, this is the government, the state is very happy with this because that means increased revenue in terms of stamp duty. So, call me a cynic, but that is my reading of the situation. Who chooses this? This is chosen at the signing of the sale contract, so really before the property is even listed. So you can't do anything about it once you get into the process. It didn't used to be the case, but ultimately that rule got changed. So you can't change that once you're in the process. So as a buyer, although it may sort of seem frustrating when you see a property that fees are paid by the seller, just be aware that it does mean the agency is getting a little bit more money, so there's probably more room to negotiate on the list price because agents are always very keen to get a deal done, particularly going back to the first point where they are really keen to get the deal over the line. If they've got a little bit more commission, they're willing to take a haircut on that to get something done. So it's not ideal when fees are paid by the seller, in my opinion, but it does give the buyer an opportunity to negotiate a little bit harder. Anyway, hope this video has been interesting, useful. If you would like any more information, detailed breakdown of the maths, let me know, pop it in the comments. Thank you for watching, liking, sharing, all the good stuff. Merci beaucoup, à bientôt, bye.